Hey dudes and dudettes, it's me, E.H. Ivins, and this is another edition of The Radical Reset. The title of today's discussion is, who would want to be the president of the United States in the next election, Trump or Biden? Or in other words, why would Trump or Biden want to be president of the United States in the next election? You know, we all get lost in, who's going to win and who's your favorite and which horse do you back and yada, yada, yada. And it's an endless discussion. But what nobody's discussing is, at least no one in the mainstream's discussing, is why would anyone want to be the next president of the United States given the situation as we sit right now? It reminded me, and where this came up, it reminded me of an old Twilight Zone episode. And in this Twilight Zone, one of the old black and white ones where Rod Serling would smoke on camera before, the whole world got so PC that we had to live everybody else's life for them. By the way, I don't smoke, but if you're an adult and choose to, party on. Okay, anyway. Back on track. So anyway, in this old episode, there's a guy, he runs a kind of an antiques and curio shop, and he comes across a lamp, a genie lamp. Sure as shit, he rubs it, out comes the genie, he's granted, of course, 3 wishes. And the genie says, but I warn you, there's a catch to every wish. He's very clear about this, so wish well. So the shop owner, for his second wish, the first wish he fucks up, the second wish, and by the way, the last wish is, let me go back to the way I used to be. So, that's a spoiler, but if you've ever watched this episode, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you haven't, listen, I'll save you the time. So anyway, to make a long story short, he thinks really long and hard. He talks to his wife, and the wife's in the room with him, and they, try to come up with a wish so perfect that there can be no ugly consequence to it. And the wish they come up with is, for the husband to be the leader of a country that cannot be overthrown, and is going to serve for life, and of a major country that cannot be overthrown and serves for life. And of course he is granted his wish, and it turns out he's Hitler, and it's the last few days of his life. Actually, they're just outside the door asking him when he's going to kill himself. So anyway, to make a long story short, there's always a consequence to what we want, is the moral to that story, and it's always a consequence that no one ever considers. And no matter how wonderful something sounds, it isn't so wonderful when the reality hits. Now, in Antipolitism, as you either know or should know, and if you don't know, pick up your free copy of A Radical Reset on Amazon Kindle or order the paperback for a nominal charge and learn what I'm talking about. But as anti-politists, we know what our system does, what anti-politism does, is eliminates all pursuit of power, because as I hold forth in A Radical Reset, power corrupts. I mean, this is nothing that I invented, but we all know it. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the more power you seek and the more power you gather to yourself, Republican or Democrat or Libertarian or anything else, sooner or later, power will go to your head, and you'll start making decisions based on retaining that power as opposed to doing what's right or necessarily smart for your fellow citizens and the culture in which you live. This is a rule whether or not you're an American or a German or a Frenchman or a Brit or an Aussie or whatever. It doesn't matter. All races, all countries, all religions, all governments, in the end, power corrupts. So anyway, and I don't think anyone watching this is going to really argue with me, but then of course we all forget that we know that when we get into these presidential elections, we all get caught up on who we want to win. But in this particular situation, neither man should want to win if they're being rational. Now let me give you what are my 5 reasons why neither Biden nor Trump should even want to win this election, why it doesn't really matter which one wins the election. Follow me. Okay, so number 1, the dollar is poised to collapse. Now, in 1971, Richard Nixon, not exactly the world's greatest president, abrogated, which is a fancy word for canceled, what was called the Bretton Woods Agreement, which took the US dollar off the gold standard once and for all. Now, prior to 1971, when Richard Nixon did this, and he did this so that he could fight or pay for the Vietnam War and at the same time pay for the Great Society programs and welfare programs of Lyndon Johnson, plus Medicare and Medicaid, which had proved to be wildly popular. And so he wanted to do both. He wanted to fight the Vietnam War and win it, which of course we didn't, but this was 1971, not 1974. And he wanted to continue these very, very popular programs because Republican or not, and this is why it doesn't make one fucking bit of difference whether you vote Republican or Democrat, even though the Republicans opposed Medicare when it was incepted. By this point, they all thought it was a wonderful idea because it was politically popular, as all giveaways are, but I digress. If you want my full opinion on how to take care of healthcare, by the way, There is an earlier video, I think it's video number 5, but check it out in the library here at YouTube on how healthcare is fucked up and what we can do to fix it, the actual plan, an anti-political plan to fix healthcare. But again, I'm digressing. So, we go off the dollars, the gold standard, so that we can print up all the dollars we want. And what happens? Well, prior to 1971, those of you who are my age or older or around my age know this to be a fact. Women didn't work. Now, I have to tell you something. I grew up in an upper middle class neighborhood in Mount Lebanon, Pennsylvania, first Squirrel Hill and then Mount Lebanon, which is a suburb of Pittsburgh, and they were upper middle class, I admit it. But across the country, middle class or not, look at, for example, if you want to see the way life was back in the day of before 1971, you need only watch an episode of All in the Family, where Archie Bunker, played by Carroll O'Connor, is married to Edith, and Edith doesn't work. In those days, regardless whether you were rich or poor, women didn't work because a person could go out and earn a living, and that money could be enough to sustain the vast majority of people on one income. Then we took the dollar off the gold standard, and what happened? Instantly, predictably, inflation and the erosion of the dollar. Since 1971, it is an inarguable fact that the dollar has lost over 80% of its value from those days. In fact, just as I'm recording this, gold is hitting an all-time high price, so says the press, of nearly $2,000 an ounce, but that's not true. The all-time high price of gold was $850 an ounce, last hit in 1979, and I'm not digressing. Remember this. This is important to this discussion. It hit $850 an ounce in 1979, and the current equivalent to be at that all-time high would be over $3,500 an ounce because of the value that has been lost even since 1979. What that loss in value is, what inflation is a tax. It's the tax that everybody pays. It's the tax that ignores how much money you make. It's the tax that doesn't care whether you're rich or middle class or poor. Inflation is a tax on everyone. And by taking the dollar off the gold standard, the government guaranteed inflation. Yada, 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 my little term for fast forwarding to today. Here we are, we're printing up trillions and trillions. We're not really even printing it. We're simply creating dollars by a press of the key in banks and at the Federal Reserve. We're creating dollars out of nothing. We're flooding the market with dollars. And the inevitable result of this, by any measure, unless you are a follower of the idiotic, warmed over Keynesian modern monetary theory, which is not going to be correct, which says you can print all the dollars you want. That's just bullshit. We're going to go over the cliff in a mad rush of hyperinflation. And when we have that hyperinflation, interest rates are going to have to go up a lot. So I want you to think about this. The United States is swimming in a world of consumer debt. By artificially depressing, okay, this is not a digression, but you're going to have to understand a little history here. When President Obama inherited the disaster of 2008 from President Bush, he didn't change Bush's policies. In other words, Bush had made a decision to basically print our way and reinflate the market out of that disaster in 2008. Rather than allow the banks to fail, rather than allow the depression to come, he put it off. Bush did. He didn't want to go down in history, and I understand why he didn't. I wouldn't either. As the next Herbert Hoover, he began printing money ad infinitum through a number of programs. Obama, also not wanting to be Herbert Hoover, did exactly the same thing and continued those policies. And Trump has done the same thing. Don't be fooled by Trump's rhetoric. Trump talked a really good game when he ran for office, and he talked about balanced budgets, and he talked about bringing, down the trade deficit, yada, yada, yada. Yet under him, all of these are at record highs. He's spending money like a drunken sailor. His largest accomplishment since becoming president was the tax cut in his first year, which he cut taxes without cutting spending, thereby driving the deficits already up to nearly $1 trillion. And of course, with complete cooperation of both the Democrats and Republicans, he didn't do this by himself. But I'm just telling you that once he got into the swamp, he stopped draining it and became a part of it. Okay, let's cut the crap. For example, before the election, he went on and on correctly, by the way, I'm talking about the 2016 election, about how Obama talks about low unemployment, but what bullshit that was, because that number didn't represent all the people that had given up looking. That he becomes president, and suddenly his unemployment numbers become the gauge in which he wants to measure everything, yet underlying it was still true. Millions and millions of people don't show up in the unemployment numbers, even before COVID, because they had given up looking. Trump just turned into part of the swamp. Same thing goes with the stock market. Before the election in 2016, remember this, you Trumpites, you know that I'm telling the truth. Trump went on and on and on and on and on about how the stock market was a bubble. Suddenly he's president. It's not a bubble anymore. Yes, it is. It's the biggest bubble of your lifetime. By reinflating the economy in 2008, instead of allowing that depression to happen, and we should have allowed it to happen, it would have cleaned out the mess. The short-term loss for today, we would be in much better shape going into COVID had we, but that's 2020 hindsight. Understandably, I understand why Bush reinflated the economy, Obama continued that reinflation, and Trump has done exactly the same thing. Don't be fooled, exactly the same thing. And we are on the brink of now, because of COVID, something unforeseen, something Donald Trump could have never seen coming, nor could Joe Biden, nor could anyone else. We can't point the finger at anybody except the fucking Chinese, communist, motherfucking totalitarian, cover it up in a major fucking city, spread it to the world, Chinese motherfuckers. Aside from them, we can blame them. We could have never seen this coming. So here we are faced with a global pandemic. We're printing up trillions of dollars, backing up trillions more of everybody else's currencies, of euros and rubles and yen and yuan and you name it. The dollar is the basket currency of almost every currency in the world. Not everyone, but almost everyone. I mean, between you and me, I would be buying things denominated in Swiss francs, just saying. But anyway, having said all these things, we've thrown all these dollars into circulation, and we haven't raised interest rates. So you might recall, those of you old enough to remember, the way we stopped the last inflation that started in 1971 was that by 1979, interest rates were at nearly 20%. Okay? Now, if that happens, and that is the only weapon the government has to stop an inflation. In other words, when the government prints all this extra money, they're printing up trillions and trillions and trillions. I'm going to give you a quick explanation of why we're going to have an inflation. The government has printed up or created, I should say. I'm going to stop using the word printed because we really don't print them. We just create them by, now it's even easier. You just press a key on a keyboard and the ones and zeros form and new dollars are created out of nothing. We've created all this money at the same time we shut down the global economy. So basically we have too much money chasing too few goods. In other words, we're not making all this stuff. Inventories are way, way down. Go to a grocery store. You can see that now they have everything that you need, but they don't have a hell of a lot of it. And you look around, for example, car dealers are begging for inventory at this point. You know, we're not producing the goods that there's even any demand for, even in this reduced economy. Consequently, we have too much money chasing too few goods. We're inevitably going to get an inflation. And the only way to stop an inflation once it happens, well, they're going to try everything first. The first thing they'll try is wage and price controls. When it really gets out of control, here, I'll put in, I'm like, I was going to date myself and say Karnak the Magnificent, but that's too old for you. Anyway, I'll just put on my fortune teller. I promise you, the first thing they're going to try is wage and price controls, just like Richard Nixon did in 1972. And just like they didn't work then, they're not going to work now. The government's going to pass a law that says you're not allowed to raise prices, and all that will do is create a black market for everything that you possibly want, and everything will be available to you at a much higher price on a black market because the government cannot possibly control what goes on. In every situation, in every country of the world, all throughout history and in every culture, anytime the government tries to set prices, it results in black markets. Period. End of story. It'll disrupt it won't work. So in the end, all they can really do is raise interest rates, cut off the money supply, and strangle the economy out of the inflation, because inflation will destroy everything in the end if it isn't stopped. Well, if that happens, think of all the money you owe. Think of your credit card debt. Think of your automobile debt. Think of the second mortgage on your home. Think of whatever debt you have. Think of whatever interest rate you're paying and get ready for it to go up 20 to 30%, because that's what will happen in an inflationary situation. The government will have no choice if it is to survive. Otherwise, there will be no government. It will collapse. That is how serious the situation can easily become. And when they do that, and it's not an if, it's a when, you are going to be, and I will be, if we don't protect ourselves, personally destroyed. Now, if you've been taking my advice all along, and if you've been buying cryptocurrency and gold, already you're starting to look smart, really, really smart, if you've been looking at the returns in both of those sectors. And I don't think you have to make a choice. You can buy both. You know, I mean, I understand the arguments for and against gold and crypto. I'm strongly in favor of both. There are some people like, for example, Peter Schiff, who I hugely respect, who's a gold bug and doesn't have any faith in crypto, and there are people on the other side of that equation. But why not both? It's not like you can't have both. And protect yourselves, as well as foreign currency denominated assets like Swiss francs that don't use dollars as backup currency. But again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds on this. But anyway, point number one is the dollar, after all that little lesson I just gave you, the dollar is poised to collapse. It's on the brink of a hyperinflation. When I say hyperinflation, easily inflation running in excess of 20, 30, 40, even 50% a year. I mean, I don't know that we're going to get to the over 1,000,000% a year that Venezuela's running, but we can sure as shit go to the point where the money is worth almost nothing the minute you take it. And the minute that happens, the minute people lose faith in the money, the wheels come off the wagon. Okay, I could go on and on, but I don't want this podcast to go on for 2 hours. I could do Well, I could do an entire course on the economics of this, but I'm just going to stop there on this one point. You get the picture. The dollar is poised to collapse. And that's only point number one. Point number two is we are in a depression. The United States economy is down, like I said in my last video. The United States economy is down 32%. The European economy is down 40%. And the only reason they're not calling this the Great Depression 2 is because A, it's being covered up in a sea of generated currencies, both in the United States and overseas, all that printed and created money. And B, no politician wants to admit that we're fucked. And C, they're all holding out hope. I mean, listen to the president. We're going to have a faster recovery than anyone thought we would have, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, bullshit. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. We're in a depression. We're not going to bounce back fast. I included in the links just one little link for you to check out who's saying what and how, but there is a ton of material out there. Use your own mind, use your common sense, but we are in a depression. And when at some point, this is why the inflation, this is all tied together. This is the money, the government's going to keep printing and printing and printing and printing and printing and printing and printing. And inflation is the inevitable result, because if they stop, it's going to become clear to everybody here that we're in a depression. And unless we go to the universal basic income plan that I advocated, both in the last video and the video before this, we're not going to be able to protect anybody from any of this shit. And we're in it. 3, well, I already alluded to it. The economy won't just bounce back. You can't, this isn't a motorboat. This puppy is an aircraft carrier. In fact, it's a supersized aircraft carrier. You don't turn around a $22 trillion economy that you turned off. That's just the United States alone. You don't turn off a $22 trillion economy and then turn it back on again. I mean, forget what all the fucking experts, and you don't have to listen and read the Wall Street Journal and do it. I do all those things for you. Let me just condense it to a nutshell. You're not going to turn around a $22 trillion economy the way you turn a speedboat on a lake. It's going to turn really slow, like an aircraft carrier at high seas. It's a big motherfucker. It's bigger than any aircraft carrier. It's going to take a long time to undo this damage. So any of you that think we're going to bounce back from this are either delusional Trump heads or delusional Bidenites, but you both have your heads up your ass. It's just not going to happen, because no one's powerful enough to wave their magical wand. It's magical thinking to believe otherwise and turn this fucker around. We are in for it. And it's like the perfect storm. We have a decaying dollar, we have a government doing nothing to protect us from it, and we have a situation where we've literally turned off the means of production across the board. I mean, could there be a more perfect storm of disaster for a depression? Okay, number 4. The Congress, the president, and all mainstream economists have no plan. They've never faced anything like this before. And don't be fooled. Just because someone has a PhD in economics doesn't mean they understand what the fuck is going on. History is littered with the names of economists that have been wrong and wrong and wrong and wrong. Hell, Paul Krugman's entire career is a career of being consistently wrong, and yet he's consistently quoted by the New York Times. And why? Because he agrees with them. Because he's a leftist. And there are guys on the right with the same bullshit, unless they're the followers of Milton Friedman and Friedrich Hayek, who are always right, and yet nobody wants to listen to them because they tell, those economic theories tell the truth, which is, there are cycles in economics, and people get hurt and people win and people lose. It doesn't talk in rosy, perfect pictures that you can correct everything just by throwing money at it. And so it's very appealing to be a Keynesian. It's very appealing to be in modern monetary theory, because it makes you believe that you have somehow the power to end economic cycles, which is all bullshit, and here we are. So, there's no plan. Now, Biden does say, when I say there's no plan, some of you are going to send me emails, and it's going to say, yeah, he has the Build Back America plan. Build Back Better, he calls it, BBB, Build Back Better. I'd love to see him defend this, by the way, because with dementia, I doubt he could even say those 3 words in a row, but without mangling up the fucking bees. But Build Back Better is basically a bunch of green economy nonsense. We're going to create green jobs by making, solar panels and batteries and wind farms and all this shit. And it's all bullshit. Again, I could spend a lot of time on the bullshit of the green economy, but let me just condense it to this. There have been many, many attempts by many, many governments over history, the most recent and spectacular failure being the Soviet Union, of central planning, of somehow being able to declare a plan from the center, like the green, new economy, and trying to enforce it. And it's never, ever, 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 ever worked. Okay, no one is smart enough to replan a $22 trillion economy with 340 million people participating in it, making trillions of personal decisions every minute of the day. It's a stupid idea on its face. So all you can really do is get the government the fuck out of the way. That's how the economy grows. But that's certainly not the Biden plan, because he's the leftist. And listen, all you Trumpites, Trump is a fucking disaster. I'm sorry. I'm getting tired of listening to people tell me of all the great things he's done. Let me concede, it's great that he appointed classically liberal, libertarian judges to the bench. I think that's great. That's great. I'm going to give him credit for that. And as far as he's gone on some deregulation issues, which is just, by the way, nipping at the edges of it, but that's more than Obama ever did and Bush ever did before him, and anyone except Ronald Reagan. So I'm going to give him, a high five. Good job on those two things. Now, he said he'd build the border wall. He fucking ran on it. He hasn't built the border wall. He said he'd end illegal immigration into the country. He hasn't put forward even a cohesive plan for it. He said he'd end the trade deficits with foreign governments. We're running the highest trade deficits ever. He said he'd bring manufacturing back to the United States. Well, where is it? Okay, we're 3 years in. Where is, there's been a few jobs here and a few jobs there, but basically, no, the ratios haven't changed at all. I mean, that's a very worthy goal, and I agreed with it at the time, and I agree with it now, but he didn't do it. Okay, what has he done? He's turned into Barack Obama. He's lauding the stock market, and he's lauding the low interest rates, and he's pushing easy money, because in the end, look what he did as a developer. He's gone bankrupt a couple of times on deals where he borrowed a shit ton of money and had no intention of paying it back. Why is anyone going to be surprised when he does exactly the same thing as president? Borrow a shit ton of money, pump up an artificially good-looking thing, and as it's destroyed, believe me when I tell you, he'll find a way to blame it on everybody but himself. I know you guys, you Trumpites, are in love with him, but get the emotion out of it and look at the record. And Biden absolutely has dementia, and his plan is ridiculous, and all that left is central status control shit. His plan, Build Back Better, is just a regurgitation of the standard Democratic Party line. It's not going to work. Nobody has a plan because, again, the only plan out involves pain and truth, and they're just not going to do it. So no one has a plan. And last, this is going to sound... I saved this for last. Let me take a little sip of water because this is going to be a little bizarre. The next president of the United States could easily be the last president of the United States. That's how bad things are. We are in a depression worse than any we've ever imagined. I mean, in the Great Depression, at the height of it, we had a 15% economic contraction. And right now, at this very second, we're at a 32% contraction. And everyone in the mainstream prays that it bounces back. But as I've made the case, it's just not. And the printing of money, the Federal Reserve announced today, in today's Wall Street Journal, there's an article saying the Federal Reserve is considering taking away one of its pillars, which is basically fighting inflation. Just to go ahead and pump money like a motherfucker. They're not going to raise interest rates. Chairman Powell has said, we are going to artificially depress interest rates for the foreseeable future, regardless of inflation, to keep the economy going in this time of COVID is his excuse. But the truth of the matter is, it's because they're out of arrows, man. There's no plan. All they've got is print money. That's it. So if they were to say they were going to raise interest rates, look, we've all behaved rationally in the last few years. All of us have gotten together and we've borrowed money like fucking crazy people. We've bought our shit on Amazon. We've put it on zero interest rate credit cards. We've bought cars at zero interest rates. We've bought houses at 2 and 3% mortgages. Yada, yada, yada. The truth of the matter is we're all up to our asses in more debt than we should ever have had based on our incomes and our assets. But it's all manageable. And by the way, none of us are in a position to pay off our debt right now. Are you? I mean, are you in a position to go down to the bank right now and pay off your debt? I mean, I am, but I have so little debt it doesn't matter, and I'm unusual. But most people, are you personally in a position to walk down, and by the way, I have so little it doesn't really matter, but are you in a position to walk down to the bank right now and pay off your debt? Can you pay off your credit card? So no, what you are doing now is managing your debt. So imagine the cost of money, which is what interest rates are, goes up. How are you going to manage your debt? What are you going to do when your payment doubles or triples or quadruples? So the government has to forestall that at all costs, because what are you but a voter that keeps these motherfucking corrupt sons of bitches in power? So they're not going to do anything in the short run, even if it's for the right reasons to do the right thing. They're going to keep running the money out, which is going to bring it to the end. That is why we could be looking at the end. Since the Civil War, we are in the most existentially threatening position we've ever been in the history of the Republic, period. We're at the moment that Alexis de Tocqueville predicted in 1785 when he said the United States would survive as a republic until people figured out they could vote themselves benefits they don't pay for. This fed by party politics, and the founders never wanted political parties, but they came about anyway. They came about after all the founders were basically dead, and now the modern political parties sustain themselves by pandering to their special interests. On the left, teachers' unions and government employees' unions and trial lawyers and the like. And on the right, the military-industrial complex et al. Okay, but all of them pandering. No one wants to say no, and here we are. Just exactly where de Tocqueville said we would be at the end. This could easily be the end. So, my question that I asked at the top, I ask again at the bottom. Why would anyone want to win this election? Shit, if I were Donald Trump and if I were a conspiracy-minded person, and I am neither, obviously, I would throw the election. I'd want to lose. I mean, if I were Donald Trump, I'll be honest with you, and if for those of you who think he's nefarious enough to think this shit up, you Donald Trump haters, feel free to comment below if you think I'm right about this. If I were Donald Trump, I would be running a campaign just dumb enough to lose, because I don't think he's stupid. I'll say the one thing that he said is correct, is I think he is above average intelligent. I think he's actually in many ways an historic figure. Again, I'm not speaking for good or bad. When I say historic figure, Hitler was an historic figure, okay? And I'm not comparing Trump with Hitler. I'm just saying historic is not an adjective that connotes good or bad, or denotes good or bad, depending how you look at it. So the bottom line is, the man's a historic figure. He's not a moron. He became who he became by following his own guidance. If he's looking at the picture anywhere near the way I'm looking at the picture, if he has a sense of reality, he wants to lose. And Joe Biden, well, with dementia, you can be told, I really feel like, Nancy Pelosi has her hand shoved up his ass and she's, like working him like a puppet. I'm Joe Biden and I'm pretending not to have dementia because Nancy Pelosi's hand is up my ass and I'm actually a puppet working for her, which I know is a bad imitation of Joe Biden, but I can't figure out why at 78 years old would you want to take this shit on? I mean, these are the facts, my friends. You've heard them. Let me cover them one more time. The 5 reasons why no one should want to win. And tell me if you don't agree. The dollar is poised to collapse. We're in a depression. The economy is not going to just bounce back. The Congress, the president, and the mainstream economists have absolutely no plan to get out of this other than print money, which, for the reasons we discussed, is a disaster. And therefore, the next president could easily be the last president. And even if he isn't the last president, he's going to be the next Herbert Hoover, as sure as shit. And who the fuck wants to go down in history as the next Herbert Hoover? And by the way, those of you who are millennials and younger who don't know who Herbert Hoover is, this is another reason that public education has to go away. If any of you just listened to what I said and said to yourself, who is Herbert Hoover? You are the product of a failure of public education, which is another subject for another day. I almost went into a little rant there, and I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave it there. Consider all that I've said. So who should you vote for president? Doesn't fucking matter. I don't think you should bother voting at all. You could vote for Jo Jorgensen, the libertarian, but that doesn't really matter. Even if she were elected, it isn't going to make any fucking difference because she has to deal with the Democrat and Republican Congress who are going to do what they want to do and are going to, at all costs maintain their power and corruption. So it really doesn't matter. So frankly, I wouldn't bother voting, but whoever you vote for is fucked. Really what you ought to vote for is the person who you hate the most. All of you Biden supporters should vote for Trump, and all of you Trump supporters should vote for Biden, because with the idiots that don't see what's coming, that will vote them in, whoever you pick is going to be the person who gets blamed and will be the next Herbert Hoover. Okay, that's it for today. I hope you feel edified. Make sure you click on the subscriber button. Make sure you click on the notification bell. Make sure you go to antipolitism.org and join us in our movement, because the only hope for America moving forward after the disaster is antipolitism. The only alternative to antipolitism is dictatorship. Believe me, whether it's socialist or fascist, that's splitting hairs. They're both two sides of the same coin, but there's nothing else. Democracy will decay into totalitarianism without a free system that fixes all that's wrong, and that system is anti-politism. Thanks so much for joining me. This is E.H. Ivins, signing off.